powers of the CPP-NPA. That's how powerful he was. And two, he was the leader of the CPP-NPA during the time when they were most powerful, because in 1986, they had over 20,000 troops. Over 20,000 troops. They started with around 800. Okay? Now, you know, they're around 3,000. I think they're around 2,500 to 3,000. Some of them are bandits, so it's very difficult to count. But anyway, according to Salas, he claimed guns and cash from Ninoy's Times Street home. This is according to Salas. And why does he know this? Because Salas says that before he became NPA Commander-in-Chief, before he became chairman of the CPP, he was the official liaison officer of the party with the Aquino family. So that's why he knows this, because he himself, he says, was claiming guns from the Aquino house in Times Street. He also says that it was Ninoy who facilitated the expansion of the NPA in Isabela via another Liberal Party member, Mayor Faustino D. And he also claims that Aquino cultivated ties with individual NPA commanders, i.e. Commander Pusa. And he says, for example, that he was very afraid that what Ninoy was trying to do was he was trying to create ties between himself and individual NPA commanders so that he could circumvent the hierarchy of the CPP. Para hindi niya kailangan sumunod sa CPP. So when Salas went there, he was very worried. He was like, Sir, kung magbibigay po kayo ng baril, idiretso niyo sa akin. Ay, bigay niyo sa akin, huwag niyo idiretso sa commander. Bakit? Bakit ganun yung mentality ni Salas? He was afraid that kung si Ninoy dumiretso sa mga individual commander, what would happen? Anyone? He was there all the time in Times Street because he was paranoid that Ninoy would create ties with individual NPA commanders. Why was he afraid? Because if he was not there, he wanted to be in the center.
Who was actually there, not Salas.
Sorry?
It was Ruben Tuason.
Ruben Carubio Tuason, who is also Ruben Carubio Tuason was also part of this story, but that is the season story.
No.
So Carubio worked in Hacienda Luisita. Carubio would also become a member of the Central Committee of the NPA, one step ahead of him. And he actually, according to Salas, was talking to Ninoy before the bombing of Plaza Miranda. Now this is all conjecture, but definitely Carubio is part of the story. But that is the season story. What Salas will admit is that dalawa sila ni Carubio. Sir, that is not mutually exclusive. You can have Carubio as a representative of the CPP, but the CPP doesn't only have to have one representative, ba? So pwedeng dalawa. Now, what's happening at this time? In Malacanang, what does Marcos want to do in the late 60s, early 70s? He wants to extend his power, diba? He wants to extend his stay in government, right? So, 1968 to 1972, he's planning a way of extending his power. And the way he would do that, the way he would achieve that would be through martial law. And martial law was his means of destroying his own government so that he could create a new one in which he would be the dictator. But he needed to create bogeymen in order to establish martial law. In particular, the Communist Party, right? He needed to say there was a Communist Party that needed to be crushed. Therefore, you need military government. Moreover, he needed to say that members of the opposition, whom he wanted to crack down on, were supporting the Communist Party. So what did he do? Ferdinand Marcos, in September 1916, 1972, accuses LP officials of having ties with the CPP. And for once, the pathological liar, Ferdinand Marcos, was not lying. Because we know that at the very least, Aping Yap was close with the CPP. This is affirmed by everyone. And at most, it was Aquino himself. Now, when did I get convinced that that Aquino was actually involved? So I already had statements from the far left. What I needed was verification from a source that had a different ideological agenda. And what organization had a more different ideological agenda from the CPP than their arch nemesis, the US Embassy? So this is what I found in the National Library. This is an airgram from the embassy in the Philippines sent to the State Department in Washington, signed by Ambassador Henry Byrood of the U.S. Embassy. And it says a lot about Aquino's ties with the CPP-NPA, but this is just an excerpt. This is what Byrood says. In private conversations with two embassy officials on September 12th, Senator Aquino said that on September 7th, he had met with Sison and several other members of the CPP-ML, Communist Party of the Philippines Marxist-Leninist Central Committee, in a house in suburban Makati. At the meeting, he was presented with a proposal to join a broad opposition front, including part of the Liberal Party, the CPP, and other radical groups. He did, however, agree to provide the CPP-ML with statement of program and principles on which he invited their comments with view of establishing basis for possible future cooperation. In that very same telegram, Ninoy also confirms to the U.S. Embassy that he helped the NPA expand Interlac via Apingap and Isabela via Faustino T, thereby verifying the statements of Salas. Okay? And the proposal of Sison to Ninoy at that time was a government in the hills, which Ninoy would head, and the coalition would have included the CPP, a left-wing faction of the Liberal Party, and the old Partido Comunista ng Pilipinas. In case there is any doubt, there's the aircam. Verified. Okay? Aquino and the CPP during martial law. Now here are the facts. Here's what we know. Okay, here's what we know. Aquino was in jail or in exile from 1972 onwards. So either he was in, Fort Bonifacio, he's now part of Makati, or he was in Boston. And that's where, he was with Boston in his family. At this time also, during martial law, the CPP-NPA, both legally and illegally, was expanding rapidly under the leadership of Salas. So I said, the growth of the NPA to 20,000 troops. Let's not even begin to talk about the front organizations like Bagong Alyansa Makabayan, Kabataang Makabayan. By the way, there's a Voldemort problem in Philippine communism. We never call communist organizations. They are. So Bagong Alyansa Makabayan, the Communist Front Organization, was also growing at that time. Why do I say Voldemort? It's like, he who must not be named, you never say it. So in the media, you go, when you refer to a communist organization, you say, not them. You say RA. You really mean the Communist Party of the Philippines. So anyway, the Communist Party was expanding at the time, both legally and illegally. The old opposition was weakened, practically destroyed by Marcos. They were engaged, some of them were engaged in bombings within the Light of Fire movement. They were called the bourgeois bombers. But from the perspective of the communists, they were disorganized compared to them. But of course, the communists will call everyone else disorganized all the time. That's their thing. And then number 4, Aquino needed operators while he was in Boston. You can only do much while you're abroad. So in 1980, Aquino reconnected with his old friend, with his old allies via Salas. Now this, I only have one source for this, and my only source is Salas. So I'm not as convinced with this evidence, but I figure I can present it anyway, and we can have a talk about it, whether or not you believe it or not. Okay? So in 1980, he reconnected via Salas, and Salas says that the correspondences occurred via Ninoy's cousin Julie Figueroa. The problem why I can confirm this Figueroa angle is because Figueroa has passed away. Now, Figueroa was a cousin of Ninoy Aquino, who was a British citizen and therefore could move easily from the Philippines to Boston. And she was the courier of Aquino, presumably not only for the CPP-NPA but for the other Ninoy Aquino allies here in the Philippines. So Figueroa, but she's passed away. Now, what could have happened? Now, this is completely conjecture, this is completely fantasy, so I'll just skip through this really quickly. What could have happened was a CPP coalition victory with Aquino as president, like what was being proposed in the 1960s, early 1970s. It would have been unlikely because I suspect that the Communist Party would have double-crossed anyone whom they were allied with at the time anyway. And that the people who were allying with them would be too cautious of them to begin with. So, but anyway. Would it have been possible? I'm not sure, but the CPP sure did. The CIA sure did. In documents that were discovered by Dominic Cauet, the CIA called the Philippines possibly the next Cambodia, and Salas possibly the next Pol Pot. Meaning, they thought there was likely to be there was a good chance of a communist victory in the 1980s in the Philippines. Why? 20,000 troops. And I asked Salas, what made you think that you would win? Sabi niya ganito lang kasimple yan. I had 20,000 troops. A lot of them were in northern Luzon. There is a city in northern Luzon where the president, members of the House of Representatives and the Senate, or the Batasan rather, legislators and members of the Supreme Court go every summer. It only has 4 exits. What's that place? Baguio. He said, marami akong troops doon. What I would have done was, in 87, kung hindi ako na-EDSA, pagdating ni Makoy doon sa Baguio, papatayin ko yung mga nasa PMA, haharangin ko lahat ng entrances ng Baguio, I would have choked that, and I would have negotiated a settlement. That was the plan. That was his plan. This is counterfactual, and I'm just telling you this for amusement, and we never know what would have happened, but I'm kind of glad it didn't happen. What did happen was, what actually happened was, well, according to Salas, Aquino wrote Salas in 1983, and he said, I want to return. And Salas said, go to Germany or Australia instead, your life will be in danger there. That is the last correspondence between the party and Aquino. He went home in 1983, the rest is history, and through that death, he was able to achieve, in one fell swoop, what he wasn't able to achieve in 20 years of negotiating with the CPP. Thank you very much. That's it. Any question? Yeah. Oh.